Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Chat with Chum. It's been a while since we had our last video, but today I have a very special guest with me. It was a session that was planned for about 3 or 4 months, but finally I was able to connect with Upasna Punj. She's a very special guest in my show, and she's a very, if I give you a very brief introduction about her, she's a digital wellness coach, someone who talks about, digital safety for the younger generation, for teenagers, for kids all around the world. And she's someone who is mentoring and discussing about this topic, which is a very sensitive and a very important topic considering the current digital growth in the world and in the age of AI as well. So before we go any further, Upasna, welcome to the show, and really great if you can give an introduction about yourself to the audience.
Sure. Sure, Chamindra. Thank you for having me, and thank you for, talking about this very, very important topic, which, as you rightly said, is impacting the world and our children. So I'm Upasna Punj. I'm based in India, and I am a digital wellness coach. I help children and families navigate the digital world with safety, with mindfulness, and with confidence. And, I think our children are living in a world which is so immersed in screens, but it's also important to help them navigate this safely so that they can actually use technology to empower themselves to use it for their benefit and not get addicted or consumed by it.
It's super well, Upasna. Being a parent of two kids who are also, always with the devices, I know
Yes.
how it is very important topic, and how it has become, something that you have to live with and live, and you should try to live without as well. No, it's a very sensitive topic, and it's a, it's like a balancing act that we have to manage. So before we go to the topic further, what motivated you to get into this area, and what drove you towards talking about this topic and educating kids and parents related to this? If you can give a brief
Yes.
overview on that part. Yeah.
Happy to share that, because before getting into digital wellness, I was actually in the corporate world for 20 plus years. I'm a chartered accountant and I worked in several leadership roles, but as a working parent myself, I'm a mother to a tween myself, a 12-year-old right now. But as a working parent, one of my biggest challenges was to help my child manage screen time, especially while you're on meetings, while you're out, and all of that stuff. So it was one of my biggest challenges. And I think the traditional approaches were not clearly working. I tried all of that, bans and restrictions and the monitoring apps and all of those things. But clearly something was missing because there was a lot of battles and, tantrums and screens were clearly not reducing, but it was kind of impacting the emotional, mental health, the relationships, and all of that. And I think for most of us parents raising teens and tweens right now, 2020, when COVID happened, was the time which was very crucial to their overall development, physical, emotional, and mental. And at that time, they were locked into their houses, and we kind of threw them into a digital ocean without teaching them how to swim. Right. And that was the time when every child was so much struggling with screen time. Parents did not have the time and nor the knowledge to really help them guide through this phase. And that is when it kind of started to impact them emotionally, mentally, physically, the effects of which we see even now. So that was the time when I kind of, again, I was also on the same boat, trying to manage work, home, the stress that the whole pandemic brought with it. And I could clearly see the impact it was having on my child, the impact it was having on his friends, on all the children around. And at that point, I decided that I'm sure there would be a better way to deal with it, because screens are an integral part of our lives. I think screens are very, very helpful. That's the reason we are able to have this conversation and we're able to, take the message to the world. So it has its advantages, but when it's not used in the right way, it can actually be very, very addictive and depressing. And that's what was happening. So that's where my search for a better way started. I started to learn more about it. I joined trainings, I did certifications, I read a lot of books, and finally I did find that better way, which I started to implement with my child, with his friends, with children around. And I really feel, that's the message I do want to take out to the world, to kind of start taking action.
Superb. I mean, that's really good. I mean, starting from a different career and looking into this kind of area and, developing your knowledge and how far you have come, that's amazing. And I think you're doing a great job,
Thank
sharing
you.
those information and educating people on that as well. So what do you think now, as you said correctly, because of COVID and everything, kids were exposed to screens, right? They can't get away from it now. What are the challenges kids face, when it comes to reducing the screen time? Kids don't know. I mean, teenagers, of course, they have some kind of, thinking ability, and they can, they
Yeah.
know, they can understand. But when it comes to tweens, like 9 to 12 year olds, those kids you have to educate. What do you think is the biggest challenge they are facing, from a kid's point of view? Why they are facing when it comes to, digital devices and how to get rid of it? Is it unawareness? They can't get rid of it. Like it's going like a chain email, right? When
Yes.
for example, we watch one video, you go for another video, another video.
Yes.
What are the challenges you think they are facing
Yes.
from their
So I
point
think
of
I'm
view?
going to address it in two ways. Okay. One is it's very important, first of all, because before kids, I think it's very important for parents to really understand and be aware about how screens are impacting their children, because I think everybody has a very surface level information as to, okay, screens probably impact eyes, they might impact posture, but there is a lot more impact that screens are having. And even pediatricians say that, screens kind of interfere with the developmental experiences that our children need for their growth and development. So I'm going to kind of list out those challenges that screens cause. And then I would also talk about the challenges and the problems that kids face and why they're not able to kind of, stay away from screens. So addressing the first part, right? Let's start with the brain development. We all know that screens lead to a dopamine crash in the brain. There is a spike where the moment we watch screens, and the spike is such, it's almost like crashing the servers. So the spike is such that anything outside of the screen would look unattractive. It's not their fault, it's the how brain works. So when everything outside is unattractive, there is anxiety, there's aggression when screens are taken away. It's important for parents to understand that, whilst technology is on steroids and, we're getting one development after the other, AI is getting more and more advanced, the brain is still developing at its own pace that it was developing at 100 years ago, right? So which means that, there are certain components of the brain which is not yet developed to self regulate, to control. So we can't be expecting our children to understand and make good choices for themselves or make decisions or self regulate, because the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex is not yet developed. It develops around, late teens or early 20s. So there is too much information for them to process on their own. And it kind of leads to that anxiety and that overwhelm, right? So brain development would be the first thing. Physical development, because now physical playgrounds are replaced with digital playgrounds, and it's only the mental part of the thing that is getting exercised, but not the physical, which again, we're not following the nature's rule. Obviously it is going to lead to problems, and then there are sleep problems, then there is meal, because children are now eating meals with their phones. So that is impacting the impact of nutrition, how nutrition and food is getting absorbed in their bodies a completely different way. So it's impacting their physical development. It's impacting their emotional development, because now we use screens as a pacifier, to calm them down, to reduce meltdowns. If they're not eating, have phones. If they're not, if they want to cry, have phone. If they are getting bored, give them phone. So if we use screens as a pacifier, it impacts their ability to self-regulate. It impacts their creative thinking and critical thinking abilities, which is so important, as we call it, as the skills of the future and all of that. But screens are impacting that. And most importantly, the social connections, right? Social connections, because now children are part of these groups, WhatsApp groups or Google chat groups or school groups, which are absolutely unmonitored. And there they can write whatever they want to. There they can delete somebody from the group without understanding the emotional consequences. Emotional connections, social connections take time, right? And our children are so used to instant gratification because they can instantly order something, they can instantly get results, they can instantly get rewards. They are so used to getting distracted because reels and short form video, right? It kind of strains the mind to distraction, because now you're holding your attention only for those 90 seconds or 60 seconds. So you can't hold attention for long periods of time. And we know that in life we don't get anything instantly. It requires patience, it requires persistence, it requires focus. So now just imagine we are training the minds of our children for something which is not going to get them results in the long run. So that whole emotional and social connection is going for a toss. To add to that, their belief system, because our beliefs are basically what we hear and see on a repeat basis. Now the algorithms are designed in a way that they show them more of what they want to see. So it's impacting their sense of self, it's impacting their body image is a big concern because of that, because now they're seeing things, they're forming their value system based on well curated feeds, filtered feeds, and
Yeah.
which is not the reality. We all know that, right? When we use social media, we use so many of edits, and everything that we put out there is really not the real version. And lastly, but very important, is safety, because screens pose a safety threat to our children, because imagine online predators. Every other day we are hearing news about some of the other online scam that's happening. There is misinformation. You can't distinguish what's right from wrong. And to add to that, the inappropriate content. It's so easy to access inappropriate content these days. And our children are still evolving. Imagine kids, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, getting exposed to porn, because it kind of comes up in their middle of their games. So I think all these challenges is something that parents need to understand, that screens have a deeper impact, than what we see on the surface level. Now, when it comes to our children, we also need to understand that, a we should not consider this as a fight with our children. It's the dopamine. That's how the brain works. So screens are releasing dopamine. Imagine the brains of our children are working against the brains of such talented engineers and people who are working to make these apps and games attractive. Every other day their job is to design hooks which will keep our children engaged. That is their job. So our children are fighting. We can't even expect our children to be fighting against those well developed brains. And the only way to help our children would be to educate them, would be to talk to them, would be to talk about balanced behavior and safety. And our job is not to fight against our children. Our job is to empower them with tools that will help them to kind of navigate this safely, which is why the importance of talking about mindfulness, which is why we need to teach them how to manage emotions, which is why we need to teach them about safety, which is why digital literacy is so important.
True. You touched upon a few things that relate. I can really relate to myself as well, because if you might agree, in the past, when our parents want to pacify us, they were
Yes.
not giving us phones or anything, digital devices. They were uh, either singing songs, they were telling us a story,
Yeah.
to pacify
Or
us
we
that
figured it
way.
out ourselves.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, they
that's the thing.
wouldn't bother, and we would just sit idle, and we'll figure out something or the other and do something which will kind of lead to creativity at some point,
Correct, correct,
you know?
correct. I think COVID was a disaster in that sense. If you think of in those terms,
Yes.
COVID was a disaster that created this kind of a trend and this kind of a situation. I mean, from a parent's point of view, they were really, I mean, they were really helpless, because you are stuck in home. You do, and the kids don't go
Yes.
out, right?
Yes.
They only see the same people, same things each and every day and now. That's the
And
thing.
I think not just kids, I think that also led to a lot of us parents and adults struggling with screen addiction, So when it comes to
True.
screens, it's not just children, who are kind of going through it. It's also the adults who are struggling, because we never grew up with these things. So we don't know, we're also figuring out, we also have, because see, when it comes to screen addiction, I always say, and I think leading pediatricians, psychologists, everybody says that screen addiction is just a symptom, but there is actually an underlying unmet emotional need that we try to meet with screens. So it's important as parents for us to not just blame screens, not just put the blame. And I think that's what is easy thing to do, right? If the
Yeah.
child is not listening to us, we'll blame it on the screen, but probably deep down we are lacking connection. If a
Yeah.
teenager is not listening to us, we'll blame it on the hormones. But Sometimes, we kind of use the blame game as an escape route, but there is kind of a deeper, reason for things which need to get addressed. And it's possible to
Yeah.
get it addressed.
Yeah, but I'll come to the next question from a parent's point of view. What do you think are the challenges parents are facing, to reduce this? Because most parents, I mean, for example, myself and a lot of some, consider me as well as an example. Many of us work, using computers, right? So we are always, we use the digital device, the phones, the laptops, and all those things. So without we practicing what we preach, we can't give the same lesson to our kids, right? So what are
Absolutely.
the challenge what are the challenges parents will face in reducing this, and what can sort of advice you can give to parents, to re, you know be an example to their kids,
Hmm.
in reducing, not removing, but basically reducing the screen time and using of digital devices. What sort of advice you can give for the
Yes.
parents, on that
Yeah.
point of view?
And I'm glad you said that, we don't want to remove it, because that's not the idea. We cannot eliminate screens. We should not even try to do that. In fact, there are such advantages that screens have. And again, just a disclaimer that here, whenever I use the term screens, it really means everything connected. So it could be laptop, iPad, phones. It could even be the connected washing machines and the Alexas and the smart TV and, the dishwashers. Everything today is connected. Everything today
Yeah.
is just listening to us, you know
Yeah.
so everything connected becomes, in a short way, we can call it screens. But the idea here is that we don't want to eliminate it. But the three mistakes that, parents make, and probably even I've made that when it comes to managing screen time, is A, we follow a fearful based approach. So when we say fearful, we're always trying to say screens are bad, or, we try to resist it, or we'll try to, um, put bans and restrictions and limitations to screens in a way that it's more fearful. Now, fear kind of leads to more resistance. They'll probably not do it in front of you, but they'll probably do it whenever they'll have open access, because they would not know how to limit. So let's not follow a fearful approach. Second, a lot of parents feel that it's too young for my child to learn about digital literacy, you know, and that's why we don't educate them. That's why we don't talk to them about it, because we're like, they won't get it, but that's where we make the biggest mistake, because if they are old enough to pick up a screen and use it, they are old enough to understand about it, they are old enough to, be literate about it. And third, a very, very important thing is also, parents are always focusing on time. They're always focusing on the amount of time that they spend on screen, but we don't focus on the content. We don't focus on the context means, why is your child doing screen? What are the triggers? For example, if a child comes back from school and feels the need to do screen, did he have a bad day? Is he trying to escape from something? Is there some trigger that is causing that kind of a thing? So understanding and not making these mistakes is going to be a step one. Step two, as you rightly said, again, parenting is all about role modeling. We got to model the habits and behaviors we want our children to do. Now, I understand our work is on screens. My work is also on screen. My work is on social media. For example, if I have to spread the message, spread the word, I have to be on Instagram. I have to be on LinkedIn, but I think it's all again about, so step one for parents, you got to build connection with your child. Because if you don't have connection, you can teach them, you can set boundaries, you can step rules and conditions, they will not listen to you, you know because they don't trust you yet, they don't believe in you, they don't trust your work. So they'll always see that, you're saying something, doing something else. So focus on building connection first. Focus on saying that, listen, you and I are in this together. So don't make it about you and me, make it about, hey, I'm also struggling with screen addiction, I think screens are interfering with our in our household, how can we deal with it? Involve them in the process. So build those connections, be involved. Don't just try to have those rules and regulations, but be involved. What are they watching? Sit with them when they're playing a game. Start building that bond. It's not about being ignorant, that, oh, I don't know, I'm not on social media, I don't know what he does on Instagram. Be involved, be on social media, be there, talk to them in their language, talk to them about the memes that are doing the rounds, so that they know that they want to be involved. So step one is build connection. Step two will be set boundaries. Now, setting boundaries is, again, it's not about setting unrealistic boundaries. So for example, start slow. We all know that we should not eat meals with screens, but if they're too much into it, start slow. Maybe at least start with one meal without screens,
Mm.
you know. So start having those boundaries, and there's a very systematic way to set boundaries, which, of course, I can't cover everything here, but it's about being consistent with those boundaries. It's about following those boundaries yourself. For example, for us, one of the boundaries is that we don't use screen while we are traveling, except when it's for navigation, or maybe sometimes we'll put on some songs and stuff like that. But it's not about being on screen, playing and stuff. So now that's a boundary that I follow, and we followed in our family. But sometimes if I have to take an important call while I'm driving and my son is watching, I would also talk upfront and say that, hey, can I make an exception today because it's an important call, only if you're okay with it. And it's all about involving them in the process, and of course he's okay with it. And sometimes he needs to make an exception. Maybe he'll have to watch some important score or some matches going on, and he'll say, I'll have to make an exception. Now he follows the same thing and he asks me for the exception, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So I think it's about having this journey, treading through it together. And it's also about assessing your whole digital habitat, because see, our children learn from the environment. It doesn't matter how much you teach them if the environment around them is not set up in the right way. So it's about assessing your own house. It's about assessing the accessibility to devices, how easily and how loosely are screens around them for them to access. So it's about making that, and it's about setting those boundaries in a way that, hey, talk to them about, like, okay, I'll allow you screen time, but maybe during this time when you do finish XYZ, no screens in the morning and no screens before bedtime. So have those kind of clear rules and boundaries that work for you and your child, and kind of work around them. But it's all about starting, because again, when it comes to parents and the community that's watching, I would just want to say this more important thing. Parenting has always been messy, for every generation, and now screens have just made it messier. But I do want to give a
Yes.
shout out that we are probably the first or second generation of parents raising kids in a digital world. So traditionally we've always relied on grandma's advices on raising kids, but that's clearly not available. Okay. So we are also learning in the process. So allow yourself that imperfection. You won't get it. There will be days when things will not work. Don't give up. There will be days which will be great. But don't chase perfection. Just take small action every single day. First thing I always say is most important thing, build connection, because that's when kids will listen to you at least. And that's how you got to begin. But it's not about dealing with it alone. It's about coming together as a community. And I'm glad, like, for example, people like you're doing these podcasts so that we kind of spread the message. And it's about coming together and helping each other. It's not about pointing fingers on each other and say that such and such sons or daughter is so much on screen. No, it's not about that. It's about solving it for each other, because eventually your child will also live in that environment. So you got to create a community of like-minded people.
Super advice, Upasna. I mean, it actually helped me to, think of this, without being the victim, right? Being someone who's supportive. I mean, it's about having those meaningful conversations, right? You have to, because the kids will always will think your parents as their, best friends and the first teachers. Without having the conversations with your parents, how can they reach out to someone else, right?
Yes.
That's the main
Yeah.
concern there. And also, I feel it's something like, taking out a bad habit slowly, right? For example, let's say as an adult, we are, the addiction to sugar,
Yeah.
right? You have this food, if you are addicted, and sometimes when you're stressed out, you go for, sugary food, right? Something like that.
Yes.
You try to reduce it and remove that, or drink some water and, clear that, that craving for sugary food,
Yes.
something like that. Same thing with the
It's the
digital
same thing. And you can't
devices
rely
as
on
well.
motivation or willpower all the time. I mean, imagine you're trying to quit smoking, but you're carrying a pack of cigarettes in your pocket and then relying on willpower to not
Yeah,
do that. It's not possible. So you have to design your environment. It's the same habit building formula, right? I mean, in atomic habits and in tiny habits, right? We've learned that the habit building formula is you redesign your environment, you create small habits, but the
yeah,
key here is taking action. So don't make it an intimidating task for yourself or your child that they feel difficult and they're overwhelmed and they leave it. But start taking small actions. Let's say, even if it's setting boundaries, as I said, let's say if you want to introduce them to eat meals without screens, start with one meal a day. Start with one meal where everybody comes together and without phones. And I think it's a great way to practice healthy habits for yourself. because we're struggling with the same. We want to get to our screens at night before sleeping. What if we're doing it for our kids? We kind of start with removing and eliminating those habits for ourselves. Keeping the screens out of the bedroom, for example, could be a small tiny action. Or asking the child to, I mean, they're very happy to do these things. You ask the kid to say that, it's your duty and responsibility to make sure that after 9 p.m. no screens in the bedroom, and start with those small little steps.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's a very good, I mean, approach to, as a first step to start on everything, right? Great. So one another quick question I want to ask you now, this situation, I mean, for kids, tweens, I mean, 9 to 12, those age range, they can be managed. But when it comes to teenagers, right, they are, very close to adolescence, right? I think there is a challenge for parents there, because when it comes to 15, 16, they have boyfriends, and they try to, those kind of a age where they try to, experiment, right? That's the age where you experiment with your emotions, the things you do, and this has led to many, suicides, a lot of things as well.
Yes.
The dangerous side has also been there. What sort of advice you can give to parents who have teenagers, will not listen to you, and
Yes.
which, I mean, that's another different way of tackling those kind of situations when it comes to teenagers. What can you give as advice to them,
Yes.
parents who have teenagers?
Yes, because a lot of parents of teens, when I talk to them, they're almost at a stage of giving it up, and they're like, now the ball is out of the court. So I want to reassure everybody that it's never too late to reset your child's screen habits, So please don't give up and think that now nothing can be done, right? You can always reset any habit at any point in time. So that's step number one. Now, even before going to teenagers, I would want to kind of, emphasize that before, kids don't get into teens all of a sudden, right? There's a process, and that's why I say that building healthy screen habits needs to start early, so that whenever they transition into a phase which is again has its own set of different challenges, at least screens is not one of those problems. So it's going to be a very smooth transition towards teens if you start early. So let's say if you have a tween, I would rather say you start early rather than wait for things to go bad and then try to fix those. So that's number one. Now, for your teens, who are actually seeing their friends, there's a lot of peer pressure. They learn a lot from their friends. They learn a lot from, they want to have their own independence, to explore the world at that time of stage and age. But I think that is exactly where I would start with building connection. Why this is important? Because you don't want your child to get their questions answered from ChatGPT or anybody and not come to you. So they would be facing such issues, so many different, as you rightly said, they would be so curious. I think having that connection in this generation is way more important than it has ever been, so that your child comes to you. So I think wherever you are, wherever your child is when it comes to screen addiction today, the first thing a parent needs to do is, what is my connection with my child? Now, when I say connection, it's not communication. It's not about doing things off a checklist that I kind of, make the food, I pack the bag, I do put them off to sleep. No, it is about how do you engage with them. So online activities, what online activities do you engage with them? It's offline activities, what offline activities and routines do you have together? And if you don't have them yet, I would insist, start building small routines and activities that you can do together. And it can really be small routine, like, maybe brushing together, right? It could even be if they are watching a game, just start getting involved. Can I just sit beside you while you play this game? And you kind of see how their thought process is. That is what will give you an insight to your next step, because I can't really define the steps for you because every child is unique. But when you're
Yeah.
going to sit with them, you will actually understand what their thought process is. Are they feeling bullied by their friends, let's say online? Maybe your child is playing a game, they feel they're bullied. Are they playing with strangers? Are they what kind of things, what kind of language are they talking, what kind of games are they talking? So start with that. Start with building connection, and kind of give that resistance out of the. What happens is, we are already so blocked when it comes to teens in our minds, that they will not listen to us. They are, I don't know in what world they are. So we kind of have that mental block already when we approach them. But keep that mental block aside, go back to your own teens and kind of, build that empathy that yes, they are bound to resist you, but your job is to empower and find ways around. So start with building connections, start with getting involved, start with understanding their digital world a little better. Step number two would then be setting boundaries, which is you can always allow them their own screen time. If you've given them a smartphone, you need to set boundaries and say that, hey, every week, so screens are a privilege and not a right, you know, and
Yeah.
every child needs to know that, and every parent should be able to communicate that to your child. That and I see a lot of parents being really scared about saying no to their children for some reason. It's okay to say no to your child. If you have connection, you will be able to say no, because eventually you have to set those boundaries. So when I say no, it's about having those boundaries and having that agreement that yes, you have your own smartphone, but these are the things that you can do, these are the things you can't do, and at any point, if you cross these limits, of course, this is a privilege which can be taken away. So having that upfront, there should actually be a visual document that is
Yeah.
your boundaries agreement or something, which will be the child has some guidance. We keep just saying don't do screens, don't do screens. That's not how it is. They will do screens, but please tell them within what boundaries. For example, one boundary agreement for all teens should be that mostly use screens in public places, like in living rooms, no screens in closed rooms, right? So it
Correct.
always has to be in an open area, open place, having open discussions about it, and having those. So I think setting those boundaries is very important. Third thing is also be close to the triggers. Okay. So are you noticing a change in behavior? What is causing that change in behavior? Be open to the triggers as to what are the timings that they like to do screens. When do they do screens most of the times? Because once you understand the triggers, you will be able to understand what is it that you need to solve for. So screens for entertainment is not bad, but what's the content that they're watching? That is what is important that you need to kind of watch out for. Also scan their environment. Who are the people, who are the friends that they hang out with? These days, with sleepovers getting so common, it's very important that you kind of set those boundaries with parents, that if you're sending your child for sleepovers, you would not expect them to be on screens. So kind of having that awareness about the boundaries within which you want your child to use those gadgets is important, rather than just letting them be.
So, I mean, that's some great advice. I mean, something, something you have to work, you can work out gradually, right? Not immediately, but gradually you can have those conversations, take those steps, and then you can slowly, go to the, desired, that I think that will help to build the bond between the parents and the kids also much better, right? With this,
Exactly.
this
Because there would
confidence.
not be a quick fix. This is work. Parenting is work. It is
Work.
hard work. And the only thing is that, you either do the hard work now and get the benefits later, or
Yeah,
you try and find quick fixes and shortcuts now and then do the hard work later. You choose.
later.
So it's about making that choice, because this is going to be
Later.
hard work. Yes, you will have to
Yeah,
resist your need to binge watch when your child is around.
yeah,
Yes, you will have to work on your own habits, but that's the choices you make as a parent, right?
yeah.
When you make a choice to be a parent, you make certain choices for the things that come with it.
You need to do some sacrifices, otherwise, no point in being a parent. That's the thing.
Exactly, right.
Yeah,
It's just
great.
recently I read a quote, and I made a LinkedIn post about it also, was that let's
Yeah,
raise kids who do not have to, undo their childhood, who do not need to heal from their childhood, right? Now just imagine screens are stealing their childhood, and it's having such an important impact on them. By the time they grow up, these are the experiences that are going to stay with them.
yeah.
So why not raise children who are happy with the experiences that they had during their childhood, whose experiences are not just influenced by screens? Screens need to be empowering, to help them learn, to help them think faster, to help them do things in more analytical way, to draw their,
Yeah.
get more data, but not to take away those experiences from them.
So it's been a really great conversation with you, Pasna. I mean, I've learned a lot. I'm sure the audience must have learned a lot as well. I mean, there's really some great things. I mean, it's a still we are not late, right? And we have always have time, but we have to make use of that time and
Yes.
take the right steps at the right moment to, build this, as I said, to reduce this, addiction and this engagement via digital devices, because uh, we can't stop them
Yeah.
completely, because we have moved on from that age. In age of AI, it is totally you can't do. But with with a bit bit of control, bit of discussions and meaningful conversations, you can have a better balance between using the
Yeah.
digital devices and having a more of a peaceful and mentally sound. I mean, because it is a lot of stress sometimes using digital
Yes.
devices, right? Stress-free life, right? Great.
Yeah. It's about having
So
a systematic approach. It's about taking
yeah,
small baby steps. And I think
yeah,
we need to stop thinking of that there's going to be a perfect time to start. The perfect time to start is now, today. So, whatever smallest action you can take today, I think it's about taking those consistent steps.
great, super. Okay, personal. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you.
today and having this great conversation. I learned a lot. Before we wind up, would you able to share some? I mean, if anyone wants to contact you, connect with you, and just talk with you and get some advice, would you
Sure.
able to share your details just to how they can contact you, talk with you
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
build
And
a
you can also
conversation?
put it in your, in the description
I will be able to.
on
Yeah,
YouTube.
definitely.
So,
Yeah,
but my website is www.liveyourbachpan.com. And, I'm also available on Instagram. I'm available on LinkedIn, where I post regularly. And I also conduct webinars. So, all those details are on the website, which I'll send you the links. So, you can add that to the description.
great. Super. We'll do that. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really great conversation, and I'm really happy we had this
Yes.
conversation after
Yes.
so much
Thank you.
planning.
Thank you for, getting me on your show. It was a privilege to
Yeah,
be here and share these
great.
insights, because I would definitely want more and more people to kind of learn also from the mistakes I made, from the things that I'm learning, from the experiences that I'm having. And I can say for sure that it's possible to change. So let's just start taking action.
Great, superb. And I wish you all the very best with all your work you're doing. You're doing great service, and I
Thank you.
wish you all the very best for your future as well, and to your family as well. All the very best. Thank you,
Thank
Pasna.
you. Thank you so much.
We'll connect again sometime soon.
Yes.
Again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All
Cheers.
right. Bye.
Bye.